The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the webcast, Evolving IoT, Why Standards and Cybersecurity Matter More Than Ever. I'm Tim Papura, publisher of Security Systems News. I'm going to move on here. This web event is sponsored by ONVIF. The mission of ONVIF is to provide and promote standardized interfaces for effective interoperability and IP-based physical security products. The cornerstones of ONVIF are standardization of communication between IP-based physical security products, interoperability regardless of brand, openness to all companies and organizations. Founded in 2008 by Axis Communications, Bosch Security Systems, and Sony Corporation, ONVIF has a robust member base on 6 continents. ONVIF membership is open to manufacturers, software developers, consultants, systems integrators, and end users, and other interest groups that want to participate in ONVIF activities. Today's webcast panelist is Jonathan Lewit. Jonathan currently serves on the ONVIF Communications Committee as committee chair. Early on his career, he saw the value of open standards and continues to push this vision. Hang on a second. Technology here. Continues to push his vision internally and externally in his role as Director of Technology Leadership for Pelco by Schneider Electric. His previous Pelco life oversaw the release of Pelco's new VMS Video Expert as Director of Systems Product Management. Jonathan has a bachelor's degree in computer engineering from Rochester Institute of Technology and worked at Linnell prior to joining Pelco by Schneider Electric. He lives in beautiful Rochester, New York, where he finds time to hike, grill, and look over the lake from time to time. So with that said, I do want to just ask 2 polling questions to start the event. So bear with me a second. I'm going to throw these questions up on the screen. The first will be, does ONVIF create standards for video surveillance only? So if you can, just go ahead and put your vote in there. And I'm going to give you about another 5 seconds. And I'm going to close. Okay. I closed it. And let's see if we can view this. Okay, let's go. So 31% said yes, 69% said no. Okay, I'm going to hide it. I'm going to go to another polling question real quick, and I'll do this a little better this time. Does ONVIF have a cybersecurity standard? So please go ahead and answer yes or no. It is launched. Just a few seconds here. Okay, we got, well, 60% voted, so I'm going to close at 67% said yes, and 38% said no. And let me share the results. Okay, and we're going to continue. Okay, so with that said, the question is, why ONVIF? And I guess, Jonathan, tell me what ONVIF is and why we're talking about it today. And by the way, can you tell me and everybody what ONVIF actually stands for? So it's all you. You should have the mouse.
All right, thank you, sir.
You got it.
Yes, thank you for the great introduction. So we'll start it off. ONVIF was originally an acronym for the Open Network Video Interface Forum. But as we continued moving along and evolving the forum and the interfaces that we were looking at, we quickly kind of dropped that long name and really just focused on ONVIF as a moniker because we expanded beyond video. So as an answer to that first polling question, we do have profiles and we do have specifications for things that are beyond just video surveillance. We'll talk a little bit about those today. As for why ONVIF, well, you mentioned our mission to provide and promote open interfaces to the security industry. I think as you look at what's happening with the security industry, the proliferation of devices across the security industry, both video as well as just kind of your standard sensor type of devices, having a standard interface that allows all of that information to be collected and communicated and centralized so that people can make effective use of it is a pretty important task. And ONVIF is trying to position ourselves to really help the industry with that problem. Our vision, in fact, is that all security systems could share one interface. Now, obviously, we think that we've got a pretty good idea with ONVIF, and we've been pushing that forward and seen a lot of success. But ultimately, it could be any interface. Our goal is that the industry experts and industry leaders come together and we all agree and drive a single interface for communication for the betterment of the overall solution set.
Jonathan, how far away do you think we are from that vision becoming a reality?
Well, the interesting thing there is that's a bit of a moving target, I think. As you continue to add more and more devices and more audience to the security system needs, and as it expands out of security into more operational use cases, I think that the need to maintain that interface continues to grow over time. We're rationalizing around, I think, a good a handful of interfaces that are focusing on specific aspects of the overall security ecosystem now. I think we're in a much better place than we were, say, 10 years ago or 9 years ago when ONVIF came out. I think from a video standpoint, ONVIF is very strong at being able to cover a lot of those video needs. And as you'll see later this summer, we're coming out with an access control profile that we think will be able to help with some of those interface needs as well.
Great.
So you talked about some of the cornerstones of ONVIF already in the introduction, so standardization of communication between IP-based physical security products. So again, that is our focus. It's on the IP-based side of things. Certainly there are other types of devices and other types of communication protocols involved in these systems. ONVIF steps in whenever you start using the standard IP layer as a communication mechanism. So that said, we have some relationships with like the OSCP organization and even members over on the Z-Wave side of the fence on how they manage their aspects of the overall solution. But once you plug everything back into that IP line, that's really where we start looking, how can we help drive everything together. Also of note, we're not doing this alone. We have several strong liaisons with international standardization communities. So we're listed with IEC as well as ISO. So I think that gives us, again, a bit more credence, a bit more structure as far as that single standard interface equation goes.
Quick question. What is IEC and ISO?
So IEC is the international. Get the acronym right here.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's an international committee. I don't have the
all right, no worries.
words right now.
Okay.
Sorry. And then ISO is standard. Everything ISO certified. It's an international standards organization is ISO.
And so, what are the implications of ONVIF's work with both of these organizations?
So what we've been doing with them is as they define the broad set of standards, we're referenced as a part of that standards work that they're doing, which means we're built into the standard declarations at a national and international level. So it's not just ONVIF putting together our specifications and going and pushing them through. We have some clout behind us, to the likes of ISO certifications for clean rooms and things, right? I mean, we're playing in that type of category now.
Okay. So ONVIF has been around since 2008. I assume that you evolved quite a bit from the beginnings when it was first born. Can you talk about the development and where you were and where you are today?
Yeah. So when ONVIF started out in 2008, 100 members, 200 products by 2009. Really focusing on building that low-level protocol specification. And early on, we started out with our liaison there. You see the EN 50132, or IP video transmission protocols. You also see a call out in February of 2011 for IEC. So working with those standards bodies within kind of 3 years of inception. You see a lot of references to the core specification in 2010. Right around that 2010-2011 timeframe, though, we started to run up against some challenges based on implementation of the feature set, essentially. So we did a good analysis on how you conduct communication between devices and between systems. But what we saw was the features that a client would implement versus the features that a device manufacturer would implement, often they didn't overlap 100%. So you had some struggles early on where you'd connect an ONVIF compliant device with an ONVIF compliant system, and they wouldn't talk to each other, and then everybody would point to the standard as, hey, this standard isn't really standardizing those communications. So there were some struggles that we ran into in those early years. The solution to that, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, is the implementation of the profile concept, which we put out in the end of 2011. And what that did was that allowed us to rationalize an expected feature set, essentially implemented on top of those interface protocols in the core specification. And so at this point, now we're able to align the expectations of our manufacturers from a device and server client standpoint, as well as the expectations of the end users implementing those systems. We really started to gain a lot more traction going into 2012. We released Profile S, and then came Profile A, followed by, then came Profile C, followed by G and Q. And we're coming out with Profile A here later this year. Really built up a lot of critical mass and really kind of came away from a lot of those earlier troubled years. Now, if you take a device that's Profile S compliant and connect it to a system that's Profile S compliant, pretty much guaranteed it's going to work. And I think that's a big part of that maturation period that we had to go through in those early phases. And now we're starting to expand. We've solved those problems. What other devices can we start to pull into the fold from that single interface standpoint? So talking about the profile concept, just kind of continuing on with that line. So now it becomes easier to manage compatibilities between conformant products, allows users to easily identify the interoperability features. We actually automate the certification process, so we've created device and system tools that essentially ping the target system or the target device and interrogate it with ONVIF-based calls, and then review the responses that we get back. If we don't get the right responses back, then the tool issues a failure report. If we do get the right responses back, the tool actually submits a certification profile, and then the member can actually upload that profile directly to the ONVIF website, thereby claiming their conformance to that profile. There's another subtlety in there that I think is pretty crucial. We don't certify against ONVIF as the forum. We certify against profiles. So if you ever see somebody saying that they're ONVIF compliant in literature or what have you, it's worth maybe digging in a little bit and seeing if they're truly adhering to the conformance specifications. You have to be conformant to a profile so that you can effectively communicate the specific set or sets of functionality that are available on your products. And as I said, we have Profile S, C, G, and Q available today, and Profile A will be coming out summer this year in the July timeframe.
Okay, so you're going to talk about each. You're going to talk about each of these profiles and what exactly they do and what for.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go through it quick because you can go up to the ONVIF website and pull down the whole specifications if you want the granularity. It's open, free to the public. But I'll hit the high points here. So ONVIF Profile S, our focus was on IP-based video systems, right? So this is really where we got started. This is where our initial focus was. And it gives you the standard video functionality that you would expect, right? Streaming of video, and we threw in audio there as well. Control of cameras that have pan, tilt, zoom capabilities, if they have relays on them. The ability to read the state of that relay or to trigger a relay output. Do your basic configuration. Set up your networking parameters, activate multicast, things of that nature. So really, that's your base level. I can access the video streams from this camera, and I can pull them up inside of my VMS. You move on to Profile C. This was our first foray into access control. Came out a year and a half, 2 years after Profile S, and the focus was again IP-based access control. Really striving for interconnectivity between the video system and the access control system. So focuses on pulling up site information, base configuration information from the access control system, management of the events and alarms that access control system knows about, and then access to the doors that access control system are monitoring. And again, focusing really on that first tier of functionality. There's the second profile that we built, and again came out late in 2013. In 2014, we jumped back to video or a media focus, looking at Profile G. The Profile G started out really focused on edge storage and retrieval, but over time it really morphed into an overall storage retrieval specification. So you can take this and actually implement a storage system and how you store that video and how clients would get access to that video, how you would acquire video from cameras, how clients would stream that video and play it back or whatever they needed to do. And we broadened it from video to media to cover really the triangle of video, audio, and metadata. And this has been out since June 2014.
Okay.
Then we have Profile Q. So Profile Q, really the best way to think about Profile Q is from kind of that out-of-the-box experience that you want. So when we put Profile S out there, we focused on that kind of steady state. How do you access all of the functionality of the system or the video device in a day-to-day operation? Profile Q is more about, okay, you're the installer. You're going out and you're connecting up this video management system with somebody else's camera system. How do you get those two things talking to each other quickly and efficiently? So it really focuses on standardizing that discovery process, standardizing those basic configuration elements, so setting the IP address, setting usernames and passwords. We dip a little bit into some of the security concerns with Profile Q, so turning on encrypted communications and things of that nature, setting password standards. But really, again, focusing on how do you get those two devices talking to each other out of the box. And then from there, you kind of hand off to the Profile S feature set. This came out middle of last year. I think it helped solve a big gap, I think, that we had as far as functionality coverage. So as we move into the summer of this year, now we're looking at Profile A, which is our enhanced access control solution. Initially, we had wanted to be in release mode for this in the middle of July 2 years ago. The challenge that we had really was working with our members to really finalize that feature set and frankly get to the point where you start to have some of those dominoes falling over as far as members defining the spec and then implementing the spec inside of their products so that we can get prototypes. The way that our process works, we can't go to final rev on a profile until we have at least 2 member systems create prototypes and test against the solution. So we finally have those, and we're looking to go forward into July 2017 with a full final ratification of Profile A.
Hey, Jonathan, if I may ask, what was the challenge on getting those, manufacturers or whoever to test and take it on board?
Yeah, it's a good question. We ran into this a little bit with the video manufacturers when we first started as well. A bit of it is everybody kind of watching each other to see who's gonna dip their foot into the water first, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So you have people kind of participating and building up the solution, but really as far as who's gonna take the chance and kind of go all in and impact the broader ecosystem that they built up with their own proprietary drivers. You have to have a couple of brave companies first. They go out there and they start to see the benefits, and then it's like the domino analogy I used. They start to fall over, and that's really where we are with the video stuff now. We had those few companies come in and they started going out with ONVIF first type of approaches and implementations. And actually, Telco is one of those. We talk about an ONVIF first foray where we're kind of all in. This is the single interface. We want to develop stuff once and get it out there and get things talking to each other. And the access control, I think we're at that same point where we're waiting for manufacturers to decide to jump in. But it's a little bit more exacerbated because the access control solutions had a much longer period of time to build up their own proprietary ecosystems where they've already kind of solved the integration problem to a bunch of different devices, right? Yep. So I think we'll eventually get there. It's just going to take a few of those kind of braver companies, and it might end up being more new entrants than the established kind of big players in the market. But we're seeing that trend happen slowly but surely.
All right, good. I'm in the industry only 10 years. It feels like 30, but 10 years. And I know that the landscape, at least from my perspective, has changed. Since ONVIF's initial launch 10 years ago, how have you seen a change in particular to safe and smart cities and IoT? IoT clearly in our title, so talk about that if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when I think about IoT, I have to chuckle a little bit because I think that's really what this industry has been doing. We didn't call it IoT 10 years ago, but we've been very focused on connecting devices, connecting things together, right, and then making sense of the information that those things are capturing. On the video side, we've been very focused on things that could create video streams, right? On the access control side, we're focused on things that can authenticate access and let you know if something's being tampered with, or let you know if some schedule has changed and access rights need to be allocated or whatever. We've been playing in that space really as long as I think the IP side of this business has been around. What's happening is I think the technology and the intelligence of the devices themselves has come down to a price point where it becomes economically viable to deploy smarter and smarter sensors in areas where before it just wouldn't have made sense. And then that drives a discussion around new communication pathways, which drives a discussion around availability of the information that you're capturing there, which drives a discussion around scale of the overall environment, which drives a discussion, and it ends up being this huge feedback loop. And I think that's why we've seen so much change in the past 10 years, because as you've miniaturized all of this technology and made it more cost-effective, people are just continuing to find new ways that they can digitize information from the real world and pull it into their ongoing day-to-day decision-making. And what's really important there is access to this information is no longer a cute or convenient thing. It's become critical and necessary to the everyday healthy operations and maintenance of all of our networks and all of our businesses. As you,
I was going to ask about the, you know, we've heard the word convergence over and over and over and over again. You know, technological convergence and industry convergence, and I think that's what this slide is going to address. Interesting topic, so I'd love you if you can continue on that.
Absolutely. So you've got, you talk about the industry is merging, kind of carrying on from the theme from the previous slide. You started out, we thought of things in their silos, right? You had a video surveillance system, you had an intrusion system, you had a public address system and an intercom system. And then what's happened is through networking, really, those devices have become much more closely entwined with each other. So that, and as those devices became more and more entwined, you started to bolt on other things. You see voice coming in, you see fire starting to bolt in, potentially coming in, you know, through intrusion and into the video system, HVAC and elevators, even the IP telephony systems. So it becomes possible now to share information from all of these systems that used to just have to be separate. Now they can start to be seen more and more as a single big entity, and that's ultimately what everybody talks about when they talk about IoT or even IoE, the Internet of Everything, which is starting to roll around as well. Now you take this kind of mess in the middle, where you're combining all of these things together and you're standardizing on the communications of how they share information between each other, and you tack in things like big data. So now you have so much data, you're pulling in so much information from all of these different related but unique industries and technologies. You need to reach out to some other technology to help make sense of it all. So how do you sift through all of that data and figure out what's really important to help you solve the need that's in front of you today? And then that leads to some of the cloud advances that we've seen. So it's hard to build a mainframe that is big enough to crunch all of that data, handle all of that data, and deal with the access convenience that you need to all of that data. So you have cloud solutions coming around that kind of help kill both of those, where you give them the extra mainframe power processing that you need, but you're also providing better seamless access to people who are on the road all the time, or are working remotely as telecommuters or what have you. And then lastly, you tie in IoT as just another potential source of information outside of all of these industries that we were using before, and now you can pull that in and layer that into the mix as well. So it's taking something that used to be very kind of siloed is a more negative word than I want, but used to be more isolated and kind of easy to understand and wrap your head around, and then pulling them all together, making them much more valuable, but at the same time much more complex.
So what does ONVIF bring to the table? And you know, I always ask the question, why should we care? Why do we care? You know, clearly there's a lot out there, and how do we manage it?
So ONVIF does a lot for a lot of different audiences, but I think the overall message is kind of, we'll look at system integrators here just as a proxy for everybody else, because they kind of sit in the middle of all of this, right? One of the biggest things is that reliable interoperability. So as you're building a system design, having the confidence that you're going to be able to connect together all of these different devices with all of these other systems and actually build the picture that the customer is expecting. And in driving that confidence, you can provide the flexibility to put together the most cost-effective or appropriately sized solution to meet the end user's expectations as well. And that cost-effective piece comes from saving money on the manufacturer side, because they're only implementing essentially one integration to the ONVIF interface or the ONVIF profile. But also when you go to install things, we talked about some of the benefits of profile queue at the top of the session. Simplified installation, I mean, that's a big cost for the installer. And if ONVIF can help cut that install time down from a day to half a day, or from an hour to 10 minutes per device or something like that, that's real money that is saved during the commissioning of that project. Yeah. And then lastly, greater freedom, right? You don't have to worry as much about getting locked into a single company's ecosystem, because if company A is the company you choose today, but then company B releases that next whiz-bang gadget that really addresses a critical need for your customer, you know that you can plug company B's product in and still provide that to your customer down the road. So it's really those three vectors, right? That confidence from an interoperability standpoint, simplifying the overall experience, which goes direct to cost, and then providing that freedom of choice and flexibility.
Awesome. Yeah, the other words in the title is cybersecurity. Just give us a broad look at cybersecurity and the happenings of the last year or so, and then where are we as an industry in terms of cybersecurity?
Sure. So cybersecurity is industry, and you see a bunch of, I think, of well-known logos up there on the screen now. What happened last October was a pretty big internet outage, driven largely by some security devices that were on the network and were able to be compromised. For anybody who's familiar with that particular story, it was the Mirai malware that was able to be loaded onto these devices. It highlights a new kind of threat profile that you have when you look at the IoT landscape and even the security landscape. You're essentially placing a potential army of devices out on the network that don't necessarily expose secure information in the way that we normally think about data breaches and cybersecurity, but they expose themselves to become complicit in some larger ongoing attack, which is what happened here in October. This malware was put out on these devices, and then they were used to establish a very big denial of service attack that was able to bring down some pretty significant data centers globally. And it was done in this case because of some hard-coded passwords that were found in the firmware on some select devices, and the hackers were able to take advantage of that. So this raises our awareness of the balance between the utility that we're getting by connecting all of these different devices and services and information streams together against the new risk profile we need to be aware of. I think as we look at examples like this in the media, we all understand the need for strong user authentication, monitoring, activity logging, and things like that to keep us safe. But we often, I think it's good to step back and just think of it in terms of how you secure your own house, right? I think we end up being much more cavalier with things like passwords and user management across our systems because our focus is on the utility. But if you look at how you secure your house, you don't just leave keys lying around outside everywhere, right? You don't just give keys to common strangers. You don't tape the key to the side of your door jamb so that if you forget your key, you can just grab it and go, right?
We do that here in Maine.
Yeah, you hide them under rocks and stuff, for sure. But
exactly.
So there's those types of things that I think we need to think through. I got to get the mouse back here. So as the Internet of Things it continues to grow, you can see 20 to 50 billion devices by 2020 now attached to this overall ecosystem of information. And we have to start looking at all of those devices with these same eyes. If you continue with some stats from Gartner, more than half of major new business processes and in systems will incorporate some element of the Internet of Things. I don't think that should be a surprise to anybody. most of us today have probably interacted with some Internet of Things level technology, whether it was looking at our phones to get directions somewhere, checking on the kids at home to see if they're doing their homework or when they're supposed to, making appointments with doctor's offices and things. Internet of Things has really reshaped the way that we interact with the world and the expectations that we have for that world. But you look at that third bullet, there is a black market topping $5 billion of people selling fake sensors and video data that can then be used to enable criminal activity. So this means when you go and you find that really good deal on something on Amazon, you've got to think twice. Like, are you buying that from a reputable source, or is it potentially coming into your hands already compromised, not necessarily to steal your data, but to be used in some other criminal pursuit? Now, not all bad. I think as we see these kind of these negative things happening and the risk profile increasing, I also expect that security budgets are going to increase to help combat some of this as well, upwards of 20% when you look at where they are or where they were in 2015.
So, Jonathan, I think if you look at the vulnerability we have today in our industry, with cameras and all of that, where's the responsibility lay? Who is responsible for the protecting us from cyber threats?
So I think the responsibility is really it's threefold. You've got the manufacturers who are building these devices, right? They have a responsibility to build them leveraging secure protocols and best practices in play, and putting the right level of protections in place that it's difficult for somebody to take over that device and either use it to steal information or to be complicit in some sort of attack. Things like hard-coded passwords that somebody could potentially look up online are not good practice, right? So I think that there's certainly culpability on the manufacturer side to look through things. Okay. On the integrator side, building out that solution and setting the right expectation with the customer about the balance of utility versus that risk profile. Making sure that we're having those discussions up front is crucial, I think, and important. And then even at the end user level, when you have that system, doing some of those basic password hygiene type of things, right? Holding your teams to the appropriate standard, and it's different for everybody. You can't just say, well, the strongest password is a 64-character non-repeating capitals plus symbols type of password that nobody's going to remember, and so then they're going to be forced to write it down, and then you're creating different types of breaches, right? Sure. But at the same time, you still have to reference that the people that are using the system and interfacing with the system are also they're also a big part of the overall security blanket that you have. Ultimately, it's all three of those working together. I think what's happening now with things like Mirai that happened in October, we're starting to get some more attention on this at the end user level, which is bubbling up in another interesting way, and that's that since end users are more aware of these potential concerns, when they're having their discussions with their integrators or even the manufacturers directly, they're asking questions about cybersecurity and, hey, have you done this particular thing, or how have you leveraged this encryption protocol, or are you checking against multiple password violations or whatever? And that's letting manufacturers know that yes, this security thing is as important or more important to the end user as the utility that they've been asking me for and beating me over the head for, right? So there's a continuity discussion that needs to be had. And I think it's happening now, which is great. So ultimately, just to cap off this particular section, we've got availability versus protection. The different threatscapes, I think we hit that pretty well. Managed devices versus unmanaged devices. So again, here's you could buy all those devices. If you just litter them all out with default passwords on your network, it's not necessarily the manufacturer's fault, right? I mean, if you leave weak passwords or default passwords on all those devices because it's difficult to manage 1,000 devices across your campus, that's something you need to be aware of. Now, on the flip side, manufacturers can do some things from a feature standpoint to centralize the password management of all of those devices so that it's easier to maintain security across all of those. So again, I don't think you can pin it on any one segment. It has to be all of us moving forward together. And that's where some of those maturity statements come in. But at the end of the day, security, while vital to IoT, it's a process, not a product. So you got the triangle of people, process, and technology is super important when it comes to reviewing your cybersecurity best practices. Another great quote that I really like here is, if you think that technology can solve your security problems, then you don't understand the problems and you don't understand the technology. That's also by Bruce, highlighted up above. So again, can't emphasize enough the importance of the discussion between all three agencies to really push this, this stuff forward.
So where from here?
So we talk about IoT devices and what their core functionality is. And if you look at them, I mean, they're very simple devices, right? They don't have a lot to them. We sometimes think of them as smart devices, but oftentimes they're not really that smart. I mean, they're built to do a very specific, focused thing. And in so, they're somewhat easier to harden when you compare it to a PC that's a much more general purpose type of device. So that's one thing that we can look at, is at that device level, holding ourselves to a better degree of maturity, building those devices out and pulling them out. But having them be hardened out of the box rather than open out of the box and needing to be hardened. Looking at what independent research is coming up with, and again, kind of rationalizing around a set of best practices, and that's where ONVIF can try to help as well, right? Recognizing those best practices and then starting to have some guidance within our profile specifications that reference those best practices. And again, awareness is increasing, which I think is a good thing.
I do have a quick polling question.
Okay.
If you all can just go ahead and do this. Does ONVIF collaborate with other standard groups like OSDP, PSIA, IEC, and the ISO? I'm going to go ahead and launch this. And if you guys can just go ahead and take the poll. All right, we're almost there, and it looks like everybody's saying yes. So let's share it. 93% yes, 7% no. All right. So back to you. Sorry.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. So what's the role of standards in all this? We talk about going forward and what's happening. I think the message is loud and clear. Security products that can't connect to the IP network aren't going to be around for much longer. I mean, the value that you get by being able to connect to an IP network is just too great. So with that, there's two possible developments here. One, you have limited utilization of standards where you go back to some isolated system silos from one manufacturer. They focus on proprietary systems, locking people into specific manufacturers, and ultimately having this limited interoperability standpoint. Or you look at really leveraging and utilizing the implementation of those standards, which gives you, I think, really that true IoT approach where you can create, you can talk to all of these different communication-aware devices that are out across your network. You leverage the openness so that people can build systems that make sense of all of that information. And you really, as a marketing, right, unlimited interoperability. But really, it is one of those things that it's like the imagination is your only limit. Because if we can standardize the way that you communicate those devices, then you just keep building new products, new solutions that leverage all of those information streams or create new information streams. Let's talk a little bit about what that secure communication looks like. Just so we're not just talking super high level, and if this is too low level for some people, just put it on snooze for 2 minutes and we'll be right back. Essentially, what we're talking about is you start with your client. The client makes a request for information, and so this top bar goes, hey, let's set up a secure SSL connection. That connection goes through to the server. The server then responds with some known good certificate that clearly identifies that I'm the server. This information that's coming is trusted and validated by me. Usually, those are validated by some independent third party. That's how you build that certificate into play. Once you have that, now you get a one-time encryption key to govern the session between the client and the server, and you send that from client to server. Now, at this point, you build on the bottom of the diagram the secure communication, which it will be encrypted based on the key that only the client and the server know, and it'll essentially just look like a bunch of ones and zeros to everybody else. This is standard best practices. This isn't anything that ONVIF developed, but it is something that ONVIF has built into our standards and how we talk about secure communication protocol. Okay, so come back up. So what else is ONVIF doing about security? Security is actually now a permanent working group within ONVIF. Working groups are how we get things done in ONVIF. We have a bunch of committees that get together and we talk about stuff, and we meet 4 times a year, and it's all a big rah-rah. But where the work is really done is in the working groups, where we nominate people to sit in these working groups, and we throw problems at them, and they get things done. They build profiles. They manage the websites. They do all of that. A dedicated security working group in ONVIF, and 3 things that they're very focused on are that certificate-based client authentication, the key store that we talked about, and then the TLS server, which was ultimately going to replace that secure sockets layer communication that we talked about. Additionally, we also have a use case working group. So this is the only working group that communicates or that reports up into the communication committee, and their focus is to really be that driver for discussions between the market and the technical committees within ONVIF. So what I mean by that is really understand what the market needs from that single interface standpoint. What does the market need that interface to do? What the market needs that interface to define? Build those use case scenarios out, and then hand those into the technology teams to say, here's what people need to do. Let's build a new profile that addresses this. And one of the first things that they undertook was looking at security. One of the outputs of that investigation is going to be a security white paper that we'll put together that just kind of talks about some of the things we know about. It's not going to be a security standard because ONVIF isn't a security standards body, but it'll talk about some of the best practices that we know about and help to kind of direct and engage in the discussion in that way. So as I said, ONVIF's role in all this, we enable and encourage manufacturers to implement the correct cybersecurity technologies and policies. This is a sensitive area, I think, for ONVIF to sit, and you could broaden it beyond just security into feature development, right? ONVIF doesn't want to be in the business of telling manufacturers, here's how your products need to work, right? That's what manufacturers need to focus on. They need to build differentiated products so they can go out to market and compete with one another. On the ONVIF side, we want to control how the features and functionalities that are implemented in those member systems communicate with one another. And cybersecurity is kind of an interesting overlap there. So again, our focus is best practices, driving the discussion, and highlighting things as they become kind of the best-in-class way to implement. So if you summarize, true IoT is not possible without standards. They're not only technical, but also procedural. Our activity, we have the security working group, use case working group, and together we're driving to achieve some security vision. And let's not take a leap backwards. Security through obscurity, well, sometimes seems like an approach, right? If we don't tell people how we're communicating, then they can't break into our communication streams. If we standardize it, then people can look at how we're communicating and kind of figure out how to create problems and hack the streams. Obscurity is not the way. We have to all rationalize around the best set of policies to protect the information and devices and protect the people that are utilizing our technology so they can continue being successful in solving the problems that they have set against them on a day-to-day. I do want to close out with just a quick talk about the conformance process. So we hit this at the top of the session. We're conformant to the profiles, not the overall core specification. So the core specification is a tool that is utilized to build conformant products via the profile specs. We do provide a test tool that people utilize to validate that their products meet the specification. So as we write in more feature expectations or even security implications down the road, those will be tested by that test tool, and we'll automatically be able to generate conformance documents based on that. We also have plug requests, I think 2 or 3 times a year, where we enable all of our members to get together and just connect with 10 to 20 different other solutions that are available and test the communication between the ONVIF compliant solutions.
Jonathan, where would you usually do that? Is that done at a trade event, or when and where?
So we usually do the Plug Fest leading up to one of our annual meetings. So it doesn't typically happen at trade shows anymore. It ends up being it's an isolated ONVIF event, and it's usually closed to members.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because there may be sensitive information, there may be unreleased product that shows up there as well.
Perfect.
So closing out the conformance discussion, there is the nasty story about conformance claims and people claiming that they're conformant to ONVIF and finding out that they're not really. ONVIF does take this very seriously. We run our own searches. We see where there are improper uses of the ONVIF certification markers. When we see them, we send cease and desist type of letters. Realistically, though, it is a hard thing to stay on top of. I think all standards bodies really have this challenge. Once you start to be significant enough that people value your mark, people will improperly use that mark so that they can gain acceptance in the market. So one of the best ways that people can kind of help themselves and protect themselves in this light is right up on the ONVIF website. You can very quickly validate any particular manufacturer. You can see if they're a member. You can see if the product that you're interested in is certified, if it is certified, with what profiles. You can even download the test report so you can see how they fared on the specific features and functionality in there. And if you see something that you know isn't right, you can create a improper conformance claim right on the website as well, and ONVIF will investigate. So not necessarily the best note to end on, but I think realistic from a security standpoint, making sure that we're properly representing the importance of the conformance.
So, quick question: how many members do you currently have? You may have mentioned that earlier, at least on your timeline. And then, how does one become member?
So we currently have right around 450, I believe. Obviously, it does flux from time to time, but yeah, right around 450 active members. Becoming a member is very easy. We have a few membership tiers. So everything from being an observer, which means you just want to kind of stay abreast of topics, to being a user, which means you're actually you're developing a product that has the ONVIF mark on it. So you're claiming conformance to one or more profiles, and then you could be contributing or full, and you can sign up directly on the ONVIF website, and they all have different annual membership fees associated with them. Modest, just to help cover costs, I think.
Excellent. Well, I got a few questions here. One is there a successor to Profile S coming? Example, support two-way audio H.265?
So yes, there is. We are actively working on a new or an enhanced video that will cover some of those new advances.
Okay. Is there other IoT or interoperability standards and maybe standard bodies emerging that could be a threat to ONVIF?
So at this point, we don't really see that. We are coordinating with a few other agencies, but at this point, we don't see anybody that would be a threat.
Okay.
Certainly not on the video side. On the access control side, you could argue we're still cutting our teeth there, but no, right now we're feeling like we're pretty well set up as the de facto standard.
Okay. On the access control side, somebody did ask earlier, and I figured I'll bring it up now. And you don't have to answer it, live here. You could respond to them direct. But in terms of the access control market, what manufacturers are on board in terms of testing it?
Yeah, let me take that one offline. Okay. We have a list of a few, but I don't want to leave somebody out and then get in trouble later.
Understood. Understood. And then just so you all know, somebody did ask this, but this webcast will be available on demand 24 hours after we finish today. You'll get an email from us with the link to the on-demand presentation. So it'll be an MP4 video. So you'll get that tomorrow afternoon. That looks like it for questions, and we're actually unbelievably right on time. So, Jonathan, Lewit, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been enlightening. I guess if you want, can people contact you with information or with questions as we move forward? I don't know if you want to leave your information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So with the email that we send out with the video tomorrow, we'll also send out contact information. So with that said, I think that's it. Thank you all for joining us. And Jonathan, thanks for your expertise. Appreciate it.
Great, Tim. Thanks for the time. Appreciate getting a chance to talk about ONVIF. If you couldn't tell, I'm a bit passionate about the topic. Hope your audience got something out of it.
Very good. You guys are doing a great job, and we appreciate it. So we look forward to more beginnings. Thanks.
I like it. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.